how are you? Obviously, you've risen to a position of prominence within the music industry, within the arts industry, as the general manager for RTR, which is an incredibly important cultural institution. How would you say you've been supported in your professional development as a woman achieving that professional objective?
I think a lot of that support's come from other women. So I think the kind of support I receive from my friends and colleagues who are women is really about taking an interest in what I'm doing and what I care about, and then participating in it. So saying that they'll be there when I organise something, and then turning up, and then being a part of it. So contributing in some way. Often we'll volunteer to help each other, or pull something together collaboratively, and that's been really important. And also just, I think, my friends and colleagues we're interested in each other genuinely, and then we can, so that helps us to develop ideas, and also a critique sometimes is helpful. So that kind of support and conversation about what we want to do in the world is really significant.
So building collaboration with other women in similar circumstances.
Yeah.
And what about mentors or trailblazers who are in the media, entertainments and arts industries before you embarked on a career in that field?
There's a lot of arts bureaucrats that are women.
Yes.
There's less in the music industry. The proportion, the gender split tends to be different.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of charismatic male leaders with a whole lot of very hard-working staff underneath them, many of whom are women. That tends to be a model in the music business. But there are exceptions. There are significant festival bookers and managers who are women, and they tend to have a bit of a different style.
Yeah.
But it's good to see them make achievements that are equivalent to their male peers.
And have they been able to support and encourage you in your endeavours as well? Have you seen that, or?
Yeah, I've always had support from other arts managers, from bosses in arts bureaucracy and other places where I've worked. So. Yeah.
Brilliant. And in the time that you've been involved, what sort of changes have you seen in attitudes to women and in women's participation in the industry?
Well, I think one of the most significant changes that we're seeing at the moment, and certainly in our organisation, although it is patchy and not everywhere, is a big shift and a big effort around language. So particularly from my male colleagues, and a greater effort to use gender neutral language, which is much more significant than I think it first seems, because if women and girls continually hear terms for leadership positions that exclude them, like chairman, then they'll continue to find it hard to imagine themselves in those roles, and continue to be limited by their gender. So that's pretty important.
That's heartening to hear, because I think words are powerful, and language is powerful, and given the industry that you're in, communication is so important. And so if you're at the forefront of that cultural shift, then that's a really valuable thing. I think it's really important. And so you can lead by example, which sort of leads me into my next question, which is, what sort of changes would you like to see in order to facilitate women rising through the ranks?
Okay, well, one of the most significant things I'd like to see change in public policy in Australia is I'd like to see paid paternity leave for men and women, and use it or lose it paternity leave for men. Yeah. Because if men can be given the opportunity to achieve equal competence and see themselves as carers, then there'll be a big difference for women at that critical moment where everything changes for women having children. Yeah. Their access to continued professional advancement and their access to equal economic power diminishes significantly at that moment, and then there's a vicious cycle after that around part-time work and a lack of promotion and things like that. So if we can equalise that a little bit, I'd also like to see. Actually, before I say my other, because I've got more than one,
yes.
idea, you might be surprised.
No, that's brilliant. Good.
If that policy change doesn't happen, so it is being done better elsewhere in the world. I think we all, look to pretty obvious examples. Particularly now we see an all-female leadership in Finland.
Yes.
So that's the effect of, decades of policy. So if we don't change that stuff immediately, then my daughter, who's 7 years old now, will have a completely different set of opportunities to a boy her age now, which just seems bizarre to me. So that we need more political will and more action swiftly on that kind of policy change. I'd also like to see the redistribution in households of income from paid work redistributed to acknowledge and make visible women's unpaid labour, because that also compounds economic disempowerment for women, which actually continues for their whole life, where you end up with, feminised poverty at the other end of life. So these are really serious issues that affect us all the time.
Yeah, it touches on the gender pay gap, which Western Australia suffers from one of the worst gender pay gaps in the federation. And I think the first one is very straightforward, and the sort of policy imperative that can be implemented relatively quickly and relatively painlessly, and has widespread support. And again, just coming back to your point about language before, it seems that when mums are at home looking after the kids, it's called parenting, and when dads are at home looking after the kids, it's called babysitting. And so you've got to change that whole narrative, that cultural narrative, and say, well, dads have got as much right to be parents as mums do. And so, as a young dad myself, I take great delight in being a dad. It's the best part of my life, and I think that unless I had a supportive, as a lawyer, unless I had a supportive profession and a supportive wife who wanted to share the parenting rights and responsibilities, or joys and pitfalls, trials and tribulations, exactly, I wouldn't have had anywhere near as much sort of growth, personal growth from being a dad. And then just for you personally, you've obviously benefited from good female mentors. You're now in that position where you can be a mentor to young people coming through. How do you achieve that? How do you see that as a priority, and how do you make that happen?
So, I think I try and look for opportunities where I can put women forward. To advance their careers. Often it is around that same stuff that was offered to me around conversation around our work or our interests or our passions, encouragement to step up and lead, which I also receive from other women. So it's, going to, again, supporting people, going to a lot of my friends are artists, so a lot of women trying to continue to have a creative practice and make a living from that, and in the context of having children, which is extremely difficult. So going to their stuff and supporting them and being present all the time through different stages of their career. Also, I think it's really important for us to talk openly about the structural inequalities that we're affected by every day, so that we don't think that it's just us, because that's a risk.
Absolutely. When
women are trying to do it all and trying to perform conventional roles as well as have careers, and trying to do it all is very challenging.
And so, do you think institutions like International Women's Day help have those conversations, create the space where those conversations are more comfortable and more prepared?
Yeah, absolutely. And also give us some data. It's really important for us to have more than anecdotal evidence, because we do see progress, particularly, it depends on the circles you're moving in, I suppose, but you might be moving in a circle where there are more progressive couples with more choice, and fathers have more choice around some flexibility in their work, so they can spend more time parenting. But statistically, things are not shifting really significantly, and we need to keep acknowledging that and keep the pressure on to make change. So yes, the Women's Day does a good job of starting that conversation. It's
a good inspirational point to finish the conversation on. Thank you very much for your time, Karen Lee, General Manager of RTR. It's a great contribution to our discussion on International Women's Day. Thanks very much.
Pleasure, Simon.
Thank you.